Hi there. Thank you for joining me. My name is Gautham Nagaraj. I'm a cloud solutions architect with Red Hat, and today we will be talking about Red Hat Ansible Automation, specifically how a connected and collaborative team can drive business. We already know that within the IT organization, different domains are already automating, whether that be the network team, the security team, the infrastructure team, or the application team. Either they're using scripts or they have internal applications that they've developed or bought. But the reality remains that what Red Hat has seen by working with thousands of customers is that these introduce silos. And silos are not the methodology in which you can transform your organization. What we've seen is that if you're able to scale the knowledge rather than scale the team, that is when you can actually drive the transformation within your business. And what Red Hat recommends is to have a single automation platform where the line of business, the infrastructure teams, the application teams, the security teams can all view their environment and manage it from a single location. So, why do we recommend Ansible Automation Platform? Let's go through it. Let's talk about the use cases and the environment that Ansible can manage. Ansible can do the orchestration of the entire lifecycle. That means provisioning the infrastructure, deploying the application, managing the configuration while keeping it secure and maintaining compliance. And what do we mean by the environment? We mean load balancers, network devices, firewalls, servers, storage, VMs, and cloud environments. So there is an integration with literally every vendor that is available. This is just a small subset that I'm showing you, but the list is actually exhaustive. What I want to give from this is that if we have a connected team, and a collaborative team, we can first of all drive digital transformation and we can reduce inefficiencies. This has even been proven by the Forrester report, which shows that Ansible is the leader in IT automation. So let's talk about how Ansible actually works. The base for our Ansible automation platform is the engine. Ansible engine is at the heart of it. And what are the tenets of Ansible engine? First, it's very simple. It's written in YAML, which is similar to JSON, so it is human readable. You don't need to learn a programming language to be able to work with Ansible. It's powerful because of all the integrations it has. It has thousands of integrations, and those integrations enable you to have the operational knowledge of how to manage that application or environment or system taken away, and you are basically working on just managing the configuration. You state what you want, and the Ansible engine uses those integrations to achieve that end state. And finally, it's agentless. You do not need to manage the installation or the supportability of an agent on the end device. It works over the standard protocols of SSH, WinRM, and can be advanced with a plugin that enables whatever protocol that you require. But this ensures that basically it's secure, and the fact that there is no requirement for a third-party agent to be installed on any device before you can manage it. That is for the automation itself. When you want to scale it for your organization, that's where Ansible Tower comes in. Ansible Tower acts as a control unit on top of the engine. It gives a very interactive UI and API access. It gives role-based access control. So that way you can control who can access which device and do what actions. And finally, it enables you to scale out so that you can have a highly available environment and be able to manage devices in different data centers while having a single pane of glass view on your automation platform. So on top of the Ansible Tower, what we give you is the Ansible SaaS service, which helps to engage. It provides the governance for managing multiple Ansible installations, gives you the analytics so you have the knowledge of what you're doing, gives you the trust because of the collections that are available, and it is a hub to collaborate with other organizations and users who are using the Ansible system. So let's go and dig and get a summary of how Ansible works. You will have Ansible admins. So these are people who are in charge of the automation platform, who will define what are the use cases that are allowed. The Ansible users will connect and utilize the use cases that are provided, and that is also done through the tower. So there is the role-based access control enabled on that side. The tower will connect to the Ansible engine and the SaaS service as required, and will trigger the job that is required on the engine so that it can go ahead and provide the functionality or the use case that you're looking for in your environment. Be that the creation of a VM, the installation of the OS, the updates of the OS, the lifecycle management of your environment. So what does that mean for you? Let's talk about the use cases that Ansible Automation enables for your organization to show you the value. Starting with Windows automation. So the first example is basically the creation of a user. So generally, whenever a Windows admin has to create a user, he has to go to the Active Directory, put in the first name, last name, email, password, what groups are they part of. Now, what Ansible Automation is showing you here is basically we're taking that action out of the Active Directory and enabling it to be done from a sort of a survey page. So any user who's delegated by, you can say, the Windows admin can go ahead and fill out the form to give out the details for this a new user who is joining the organization. And basically that means that myself as Gautham, I can go and basically fill out this form and then click the submit button, and that might go to a Windows admin for authorization, and then once authorized, it'll go ahead and create the user within the organization. That means that we basically take the access out of the Windows Active Directory and put it into Ansible Automation, and that can be delegated to whoever we want. This could be part of an HR process for onboarding a new user. So you create the user, you give him the permissions, the network access, the file share access that they want. That all can be automated from Ansible. Let's talk about the other use case, which is patching servers. So with this use case, what we're doing is basically enabling an admin or a user to patch a specific server. So it could be, in the case of yourself, a developer who can then go ahead and say, I want to update this server, or a desktop admin who can go ahead and say, I want to upgrade a specific server, and choose which patches to include, which patches to exclude, which groups to include, and make it a self-service sort of catalog item, so that instead of having admins to do it, which are a precious resource, we can instead have the users schedule when they want to do sort of an update on their system. Now, the next use case is the network automation. So what I have here is from the engine. The first two use cases that I showed you on Windows, that is actually from the tower. Now I'm just digging deep, showing a bit of the information of how the actual engine does it. And this is a playbook which basically enables a user, once they run this playbook, to run on a Cisco switch or router and get the information from the interface. So this is the output as it was run on a specific server, switch or router. Now, what you can take away from this is that a very standard use case that you have your network admin, he's going on personal time off. But the fact is that the task that he does as a daily task needs to be done by someone else. So that means that needs to be handed over. But what you have the scenario where the backup for someone is also unavailable because they're sick or they also have some emergency. So what are you supposed to do? What we're doing here is showing the ability to scale the knowledge. The actual use case or whatever daily job that the network admin is doing can be scheduled or can be configured inside Ansible Tower. So that would mean that basically that any person who's delegated for that task will be able to run it. If you notice over here, the user who's running the task does not have access to the switch or the router themselves, does not have the credentials for it. All that has been done is delegated from Ansible Tower. You have the authority to run a specific playbook on a specific device and get the output. And that output is also within the Ansible tower itself. So it's never that the user is actually accessing the device themselves. So that is a very powerful tool. I would give you an example of this specifically in network automation. The most common task in network automation is opening ports. You have a source machine, you have a destination machine, and you need to open a port on a specific port, like a database. Application reaching a database needs, the port 1525 or 1521. So what happens? Me as a server admin will request this from the network team. It'll go through the governance and approval process. And once approved, it gets scheduled to a network admin's task. The fact is that the network admin not necessarily is waiting just only for that use case, right? He's doing 100 other tasks. So what will happen is, me as a server admin, I have to wait because I'm held up on the task chain. And once the network admin finishes his job, he will complete the task on his side, which is the network side, the firewall or the router or the switch that he's doing the work on. And then he'll update the service ticket to say, I've completed my task. Can you please check and close the ticket? Now, again, as a service admin, I'm also not only waiting for that. I'm doing 100 other tasks. So there is always the fact that from end to end a service, the delay is never on the person, but rather the lead time before they can get to that task. So what happens with Ansible Tower is, first of all, me as a server admin, I can go ahead and fill out a form that says, this is my server, source IP address, destination IP address, and which port I want opened up. Once it goes through the governance and approval process, it can be scheduled by Ansible Tower that can go and directly connect to a firewall, Palo Alto, Cisco, whatever solution that we're talking about, open up the required port and say it's done. And then it'll come back to me for testing. We can take this a step further in a two-stage process where we give another use case, which is the testing of ports. I can create in Ansible a use case which will say, this is the source machine, this is the destination machine, and this is the port. Please test whether the port is open. So if there's a service already running, I can also have that automated. And how does this work out? I can either have it so that the network admins can use that to do testing. So they can, without accessing a server, test whether the port is working or not through the telnet test. Or I can even make it part of the Ansible job as a bigger workflow where I give the first job, which is to open the port, and then the second job, which is to basically test after that port is open whether the source machine can reach the destination machine. And that gives us an end-to-end service with a validation test done to ensure that the task is completed successfully. What this enables is that any user requesting the service can get end-to-end feedback. And if there is an issue, then Ansible can also say, okay, I was able to open the port, but my test failed. Please send a notification to the network team saying that, listen, dear Mr. Network team, we've opened up the port, but the telnet test is failing. Let's inform both the server team and the network team so that they can both troubleshoot on their end. So that is the way that we basically take it forward. The next automation use case is around security. And quite frankly, we are supported with the N number of security vendors. You can see the famous ones over here already. And what the idea between the security automation is that Ansible can be a response tool to a certain incident. So let's say you have an IDS or an IPS, so that detects that there is something wrong, or that detects a denial of service attack from a specific IP. What can happen is a playbook or a use case can be run that says, dear firewall device or security device, there is an IP address that's 195.1x.x.x that is attacking me. Please drop all packets from this external IP address. So what will happen is immediately a new rule gets created on your external facing sort of entry point that drops the packet. So that protects you, first of all. Second of all, we can then go ahead and notify a security admin to say, dear security admin, we've done this. Can you please check? Is there something wrong? Is this a false alarm? But I have blocked this already. So that gives you the first mover advantage, where you don't have to first get notified before you do an action. You are basically doing an action and then also getting notification at the same time. So it's a parallel task. So that is the advantage that we can basically produce when we have Ansible automation. The other use cases that I want to discuss is the application automation use case. So let's talk about this use case. We have in an environment Dynatrace, which is an application monitoring tool, and it's monitoring your application, and it detects the first use case, that there is a degradation in the service. Now, we've already encountered this before. So what's happened is that we in Ansible, generally, what are we automating? The most common use cases, the ones that we see again and again and again, and makes it so that we don't have to do it again, right? We are basically automating away the day-to-day jobs and looking towards our users to give the value add service. So there is a user degradation activity or a trigger, and Dynatrace then basically goes and says, "Dear Ansible, I want you to do the remediation job." And that is what Ansible will do. As soon as it's triggered, it will go and do a remediation job and also go and give a notification or an email to the admin saying that I've done this job, can you please check that everything is fine? It can do a feedback loop where Dynatrace can then configure and retest and see whether everything is working fine or not. We have the other use case, and this is where I want to show the way that how Ansible, because of its heterogeneous capability of working across different environments, the use cases that we showed till now have been, you can say, minor use cases across one platform, and you could say that I could do that myself. But now, let's talk about where Dynatrace is monitoring an environment and it sees that the capacity is reached or there's a threshold reached. So that means it needs to now either increase the capacity, but it can't because even that internal capacity has been reached. It needs to provision a new server and add that server to the pool. And so what it does, it triggers a job to Ansible, which will then trigger multiple jobs. First of all, it'll create a ticket in ServiceNow or your ITSM tool saying that, listen, I am doing this creation of a new system because I've been given the trigger from the application monitoring. So let's open a ticket so that it's aware of this change that I'm doing. Next is go to your, so let's say VMware environment, say provision me a new VM. I mean, provisioning a new VM from a template, that's straightforward. But after you provision the VM, you go ahead and get inside the OS, make sure to update it, make sure to add it to the domain, make sure that it passes your compliance tests, install the application stack, whatever the application stack might be, JBoss EAP, for example, or WebLogic, or WebSphere, or Spring Boot, or Python, or PHP, or whatever stack that we're talking about. Yeah, it can install it. Then it can also put in the binary and configure it if it's a web server or whatever the case is. Once that's done, it will go to the load balancer and say, dear Mr. Load Balancer, you're doing application load balancing for a specific set of 2 or 3 servers. Now there's a 4th server. Please add it to that virtual server so that you basically add that to the pool. You also make sure to open up the required ports that you need between, let's say, the application and the database. So that is the end-to-end service that we're talking about, that is possible from Ansible. So, and finally, Ansible can then close the ticket saying that I have successfully created this. This was the start time. This was the end time. These are the details of the systems that I've interacted with, and so that you have it as a record as well on what was the automation that was done. So now, those are specific use cases. These are some of the studies that we have done and the metrics that we have, that how Ansible basically speeds up your remediation, how it helps you deploy more often, how it helps you optimize your staff, and how it better enables you to be prepared for future. This is a reference, and we have a reference, basically a public reference from Microsoft, who within their network environment are actually using Ansible. So you can understand if a company like Microsoft is using Ansible, the capabilities that are possible from Ansible, and the fact that how ubiquitous Ansible is within the IT industry. So how do you start? So now you know that what we are suggesting, which is Ansible Automation Platform. Why are we suggesting it? So that you have collaboration and better coordination for better business outcomes, to have a single pane of glass view on what are the activities that are happening within your organization, to be able to better schedule, to better catalog all the requirements that you have within your IT. That is what Ansible gives you. The specific use cases where you can see the most value, some of the examples of what we are suggesting, and of course these are all dependent on your organization. So how do we start? What we suggest is, first, let Red Hat come and do a discovery. Let us understand from you what is your environment, what are the most common tasks you guys are doing, what is the best value that you can get, and then let us start with a small pilot where we will build an environment for you, the automation platform itself, and some use cases that will then show the business value. It will show you that before you were spending 100 hours on doing a specific task and how many hours it takes post that task, and so what is the value that you've gained in terms of man hours from that. And then we will give you a journey that takes you from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 towards an automation journey where you can basically have an everything as code automation environment available. So that's it from us. Thank you so much for your time. If there's any questions, we would be more than glad to hear from you and to take it forward.